Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you all for being here and for tuning in again this week as I have the deep honor to interview this week's guest. This week, I have with me Danielle DesRosier. She is 25 years old, and this I think is going to be an emotional one for me. I'm just going to say that up front. Danielle was 20 years old when she lost both her parents. She lost her father, Charlie, to cancer. It was a very quick 6 weeks from diagnosis to death. And then 6 months later, she lost her mother very unexpectedly, Rhonda. And we're going to talk about both of that. Danielle is an only child. So I just ask if this could be a trigger for any of you to make sure that you've got some support in the room. So I'm going to welcome you, Danielle, to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
Why don't we start by telling us a little bit about where you were in your life at 20 and tell us about your parents.
Yeah, I love that. I love talking about who they were as people, and I love talking about their lives so much. So thank you for starting it off with that. So I just consider myself the luckiest. I had a very picturesque, like idyllic upbringing. Like my parents were the absolute best, like my best friends. And as an only child, like we were closer than close. And so overall, like I am so grateful that I got the 20 years with them that I did. So I was in college. It was my junior year of college when they both passed away. And up until that point, I had been living a very like stereotypical American college experience. I was living in my sorority house, like in a sorority. I was working on campus and just like so engrossed in all of that. And when my dad got sick, we knew, he was going to be going into hospice. I ended up deciding to take that term off of school, and he ended up passing away on what would have been the first day of school. So he had head and neck cancer. He had it a little bit prior, and he had 3 surgeries, chemo, radiation, did all of that. And then he was in remission. He had a clean bill of health, and it really felt like he had a new lease on life. And just he always had said that he would just prayed to have 6 more good months and just be able to like live his life as much as he could. So I am grateful that there was that time where he was doing better. And then very quickly out of nowhere, it felt like he started having a lot of debilitating pain in his neck. And, we kind of wanted to chalk it up to being like, some long-term side effect of radiation or, he had so many surgeries, like, something to do with that. Like, no way that the cancer is back. And so they ended up doing an MRI. And I will always remember we were sitting on the couch. It was a Tuesday morning. We're just sitting on the couch watching TV. And my dad's oncologist called us. And my dad had him on speakerphone. And he told us, he just said, it's back. And I just remember immediately breaking down hearing that and sitting on the couch like with my parents. And I think, going through a parent being sick, especially like my dad, that was the first time I really saw my parents as people and like people with feelings and individuals and not just like parents. And to see my dad be scared by that was scary for me. And, that's somebody who is always brave and strong and can do anything. And to be told at this point, like it's a palliative situation, like it's hospice time, like it's inconceivable for him, who was just like the strongest, like most full of life man, like just a bigger than big kind of human. Just he exuded joy. He never met a stranger. He was just always so lively and full of life. And the fact that anything could take that away from him was crazy. So yeah, so like I said, I took that term off of school.
Can I slow you down for a second? Because I think that you had said too that this whole period of time, your dad was 57 years old. He was very, very young. And you said the whole thing lasted 6 weeks, right? From the time he was diagnosed.
Yes, so he was re-diagnosed. So he had had cancer before.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
And then he had been in remission.
And then it came back and then it was super quick. Okay. Now let's talk to us about your mom.
Yes. And so then my mom, after my dad passed away, me and my mom were always close, but I think that just made us so much closer. And we really saw my dad being sick and took that as this inspiration for us to just kind of keep going. And we just fully were living. So we went on The Price is Right. I ended up winning The Price is Right, which was
are you kidding? Are you kidding?
The coolest thing about me. My life definitely peaked then. And so that was super fun and such a great memory with my mom. And I got to spin the wheel. And so when I spun the wheel, I got to, you can give a little shout out. So I got to give a shout out to my dad in heaven, which was really, really special to get to do that. And so, yeah, me and my mom just went on all of these adventures. And then I went back to school in January, and everything was just, I was very, sad and grieving and all of that. But I always said I couldn't have gotten through it without my mom. My mom and I would talk basically all day, every day. I was going to school a couple hours away, but I could call her with anything. I could get home easily on the weekends. She could come and visit me. And we really had this routine going. And then she passed away on a Friday morning. She had a pulmonary embolism. And
Can you tell our listeners what that is?
so she had a blood clot that had started in her legs and it made its way to her lungs. And I think it's so hard in so many different ways for me to rationalize that and to understand that, because it was seeing my dad be sick, that in some weird way made sense that he was sick. But for my mom, on Monday she had her annual physical and she was fine, she's perfectly healthy, and then she passed away on Friday.
And they have no idea what caused the clotting.
Mm-hmm.
God, that is just wild.
I mean, to me it's a broken heart.
What did you say? It's a what?
To me it's a broken heart.
That is where my mind went. Did that, see, you guys, I told my listeners I was going to get emotional during this when I could feel it from the early on. So yeah, that your mom, the deep grieving that she was doing over your dad, think contributed to her death.
I think so. And my parents were soulmates. They were truly just made for each other and the best of friends. And I don't think that they could be apart.
Okay, so just the thought of you being 20 years old, a senior in college, you've now lost both of your parents. I know that before we started talking, you said your mom's mom, your grandmother, is your everything. Can you just talk to us of what your life, what your grief journey has looked like since your parents died? What have you done? Did you do any grief counseling? Just talk to us about what your life has looked like.
I think I was in shock for so long. I think after my mom died, I just was in so much denial and shock by it that it took me a good year and a half before I really started to fully grieve and process it. When it first happened, I was kind of just in action mode and go mode, which looking back on it, I don't understand. I'm how did I do that? Why did I do that? What was that? So after my mom passed away, she passed away in May. And then in August, I started an internship. That was my dream internship. It was at Southwest Airlines in Dallas. And I'd been wanting to do that for so long. And you get flight benefits when you work for them. So every single weekend, me and my friends there, were going to new cities and just traveling. And it was just because I think I was in so much shock that I didn't realize fully what was even happening, that I just kept going like that. And then I went back to school. So I finished out then my senior year that spring and just powered through. I graduated, immediately went to Europe for 5 weeks. My parents had never left the country, and I wanted, and I still want, to be able to see all the places they didn't get to see. And I believe that when I do that, I'm taking them with me. And I believe that if I see these things, then they're also seeing them. And so, yeah, I did that. And it was when I got back from that trip that everything hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was life kind of slowed down for the first time. And I was just oh my gosh, this is real. My parents died. I was living in their house by myself. I was alone for the first time in my whole entire life. And from there, things started to get a lot more difficult. And then COVID hit. And that became, of course, like even more isolating, where, as we were saying, like my grandma, who is my everything, my world, my rock, with COVID, then I couldn't see her even for a little while. And just the isolation that came from all of that. So not only feeling alone in my grief, but just like all the physically being alone without a family ended up really getting to me.
I'm overwhelmed just by listening, honestly. Like I can't imagine actually living it. So I have to back up a little bit. I certainly understand that year and a half where you're in shock. It's almost too much to handle. You are going to school, you're finishing. And I just want to say, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the strength that that must have taken, because how easy it would have been for you to drop out. So I want to acknowledge that. And congratulations doesn't seem like the right word, but just wow, that just tells me so much about your spirit and who you are, which I'm sure comes from your parents. For some
My,
reason.
my parents didn't go to college, and it was really important to them that I did. And so I think a lot of what kept me going was like, this was important to them. Like, I'm doing this for them.
Yeah. And so then you get back from Europe, and now life breaks are yeah, right? Like, okay, I've done school, I've done this trip to Europe, got to get a job, or maybe you already had one. But what struck me is going back to your childhood home with your parents not being there. Was your grandmother living there, or did you go, you were by yourself? Like, not to mention when somebody passes, there are so many things to take care of. What was happening for you? I mean, you're in your parents' home, bills, like all the things that you don't have to think about. How did you handle it, Danielle? Truly.
I don't know. I don't know. There was so much stuff that had to get done. And whenever somebody dies, like things have to get done, like all of those logistics, bills, and all of that. They don't care that you're grieving. Like all of that has to keep on going. And I thankfully I do have a lot of really great support who was able to help me with, I guess, like all the more logistic side of it. And I got connected pretty quickly with a fantastic attorney and financial advisor to help me on that side of things. So yeah, I wouldn't have been able to figure anything out like that on my own.
Yeah, like just it's incredible. And so did you keep your home?
So
Did you
that was a really big decision for me. I lived there when I graduated college because it made sense. Like there's this house and I wasn't ready to sell it. So I went and I lived in it. And that ended up being very difficult for me, which I knew it would be, but I guess I didn't realize how difficult. And that was when a lot of the grief started to hit, where I could not be in the house. I could not go into the house without either somebody with me or someone on the phone. Like I would sit outside the house for 2 hours if I had to until someone could like be on FaceTime with me and go in with me, because it was just too much. And the only thing that I could kind of equate it to, but not really, is like when my childhood dog died. Whenever I would get home, I would still expect her to be running up to the door to greet me, or I would still like expect to hear her like barking at something. And it felt the exact same without having my parents there. Like I, would be asleep and I would hear something, and my natural thought would be, oh, my mom probably just flushed the toilet. And it's like, no. And then I hear something and I get scared because I'm there by myself, and waking up in the morning, and like it ended up being really debilitating for me to live there. My bedroom was upstairs, and when I would get up in the morning, I couldn't even get myself to go downstairs to get a water or food or anything, because going downstairs and not seeing anybody there, every single day I woke up in that house, it was like they died again.
I realize I'm holding my breath because I simply don't know how you did it. Like I simply can't fathom it at all. Being there, living there, getting up, waking up. And of course, I have such an overactive imagination, and I believe in the spirit world that, I'm laughing not because it's funny, but because even after my brother died, even with my mother, sometimes I will hear something And I'm like, they're here, you know, because I talk to them all the time. But I'm just imagining like being in that house. It must have felt like it was full of ghosts.
So yeah, I got a cat, which helped me to not feel so alone in the space and just kind of gave it something of life because it wasn't my childhood home. So I didn't have all of my like childhood memories and stuff there, which
Okay.
a big difference. But it just reminded me of death there. And I needed something to give some kind of life to it. So I got my cat, Ronnie,
I
and
love that.
yes.
Did you
And
say Ronnie? Did you say Ronnie? Is
yeah,
that after
Ronnie.
your mother, Rhonda?
No, well, coincidentally, no, but that was his name at the shelter. And so I got him and I was like, that's meant to be. Like, he's my cat. And so getting him was like so helpful because it gave another sign of life to the house. But then I kind of started to have a little bit more responsibility too. So I had started to have like more reason and purpose to do things because like I said, like I had trouble going downstairs. I couldn't get myself to go to the mailbox. I couldn't get myself to do so much as open a window sometimes. Like I was just in this debilitating depression. And I got Ronnie and all of a sudden, you know, he needed to have a clean litter box. He needed fresh food and water. And it was like having to do those things for something else. It gave me the momentum to kind of start going again.
It's amazing how healing animals are, isn't it? I just have to tell this story. I think a lot of people have heard it before, but my brother Rocky died in 2014, and I had a golden retriever who died right at the end of 2020, at like the end of December. And we ended up getting a little miniature Aussie Doodle, and I went online and never had a little dog before, decided on this breed, go to the website, and his name was Rocky, and he shared my brother's birthday and I bought him.
Oh my, and the
And
birthday.
yeah, November 24th birthday. I was like, and when you said Ronnie, of course, right? I mean, it made total sense. And are they heaven sent? I believe so, right? Did that cat not give you exactly what you needed to start to feel like you were living again? I have to ask though, you said that you were surrounded by support. Did you just, I know your grandmom, did you just have really good friends and their parents and probably your friends' parents too, right? Who came to your aid and wanted to be there for you. Who was it that suggested a cat? Did you come up with that on your own, or did someone say, hey, why don't you get a pet?
My grandma. So we went to the SPCA together and we found him.
And was part of the reason you chose him was because of his name?
Yeah. So yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Isn't that
And
awesome?
yeah, yeah. I'm surprised. Normally he's like sitting right there. So I'm upset he's not there right now.
I know, where is he?
I know, I don't know. He's hiding somewhere.
So what happened to your home? Did you sell it? Did you end up
Yeah.
selling the house?
Yeah. So I ended up, like I was saying, it was just debilitating for me living there. I could not function. And so I think I got to the point where I was like, this house isn't helping me right now. I wanted so badly for it to be something that made me happy. And I wanted so badly for it to be something that felt like love, but it just didn't. And you can't force that. And it ended up not even being like very livable because I was so particular about nothing being changed in it. For example, there was like a teacup that was on the counter, and my mom put it there just randomly. Like, I'm sure there was nothing to it, but no one was allowed to touch it. Like, I did not want anything moved. And so whenever people would come over, I'm like, you can't sit in that chair. You actually can't grab that cup. Like, I just had so many rules around everything being preserved in a way. And so that also made it difficult just being there. So I decided that I needed to move, and really I needed to get out of that whole area in general because I had a lot of anxiety around the town and just like the hospital where my mom died, which is also where my dad got his treatments. Like, if I go up there, I still can't drive by it. Like, I have a full panic attack if I see it, and just the things that it holds for me. like it makes my chest even feel tight thinking about it. So I realized I needed to get out of there. And so I decided to sell the house. And that's when I moved to Southern California.
And where were you? What's the proximity of where you were with your parents and where you moved?
Yeah, so I live in Los Angeles now, and their house was in the Sacramento area. So it's about 7 hours away.
You moved. You're like, I'm moving.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just, I find you to be, I don't know, I guess remarkable is the only word that actually comes to mind. You have to tell us. So, I mean, where did you find the courage to do all of these things? Like selling your house, for example, did you talk everything over with your grandmother? Was she sort of the one that you could, just talk things through? And just the thought of loading up the house, selling the house, doing all of the things that you have to do to even get a house prepared to sell. Were you doing this by yourself, or who was helping you?
I have my best friend is like, I can't help but just smile when I think of her. Like, I have the truly like most best friend in the whole entire world. And she came with me to my parents' house all day, every day for 3 days. Like, they were like 12-hour days. And we went through every single cabinet, every drawer, every, pocket of jeans hanging in closets. Like, we went through everything, and she helped me go through all of it. And we made like a keep, put in storage pile, a donate pile, and a trash pile. And one, I wouldn't have been able to get the momentum to even start doing that without her. And two, I'm so grateful for her because she knows me well enough to know, like, if I needed, and I trust her, like if I needed to step away, if I had to go sit outside for a minute or an hour or two, like she's someone who's always looked out for my best interest. And, people ask what they can do to help somebody going through a loss. And to me, people like her who like did things like action oriented things of like helping me get through that was incredible. So she helped me figure out getting a storage unit. She connected me with a real estate agent, or her family helped me connect with that. And yeah.
It's amazing. I just wrote a little clip about, often we don't know what to do when somebody dies. And I'm with you 100%. It's action. Bring food that people can freeze, right? Because you can't really eat event, it takes a while, right? But I remember my brother, he died over in Hong Kong, and I had one of my best friends brought me a bag full of every imaginable thing for the plane. I mean, medicine, like everything you can imagine. I mean, it's so difficult when you have a loss that is so sudden that it's just like being surrounded by fog. You can't see anything. You have absolutely no idea what to do. And when you were talking about really being debilitated, where you probably could have just, if you didn't have bodily functions like needing to eat and drink and go to the bathroom, that you really just want to be in bed and die too, right? Just pull your covers over your head and just call it a day. I mean, that's the only thing. Every time when I sit here and try to imagine you with your mother dying after just losing your father at such a young age, I think that's one of the things that I used to say sometimes, those things that are just unimaginable, like you can't know it until you're going through it. Did you feel that you had that kind of support from friends? I mean, you were in college at the time. Were your professors supportive? Like, because sometimes that's not our experience, right? Where people don't get it and it can feel even more isolating. And I also want to talk about COVID too, like specifically what you did to get through that time. What other kind of support did you find helpful during this time when you were in college?
I think I love that your friend got you that package and stuff to everything you would need to get through the flight. Like, that's so creative. And I think the best of friends are the people who think of that kind of stuff and just like, because it's not even something that you would think of. And so it reminded me of one thing that someone did for me was they gave me a basket of sunshine, which was just all yellow stuff. It was like popcorn and sunflowers and a yellow Kleenex box and just like all this yellow stuff that was a basket of sunshine. And I thought that was so creative. And I've done that now for a couple of people after they've lost somebody. It just like stuff that they are going to need, like Butterfingers, for example, like yummy stuff. But yeah, was kind of all over the place in how and like the support that I got. I thankfully my school was extremely, extremely supportive. And my professors were very accommodating. It was getting close to the end of the school year when my mom died. And unfortunately, it was past the drop deadline for classes. And so I did technically have to finish out. And I ended up failing a couple of my classes for that term, which was very frustrating that that couldn't be accommodated and I couldn't get a withdrawal after that. But my professors who were supportive made such a big difference. Like I had one who would bring her two dogs to campus so that I could come to her office and play with them or take them for a walk. When I got back to school, my bed, I lived in my sorority house, and my bed had like a bunch of stuffed animals. People had gotten me on it. And like Sprite and goldfish are my two favorite things. So they had like a bunch of Sprite and goldfish on the table.
Oh, that just makes me want to cry.
And things like that are so sweet because it's like people remembering like the little things that you love.
They're taking care of your heart, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because let's face it, there's nothing anyone can say or do to take away that sharp edge of grief. But to know that we're being thought of and held, even energetically, makes us understand and know that we're not alone, no matter how alone we feel. And sometimes that's all we can do for somebody. And it's the most powerful thing that we can do is checking in, and you're not alone. Even if you don't feel like talking to somebody, right? Just getting a text, I love you and I'm thinking of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Danielle, what did you do during the pandemic? Where were you? Were you still in your family home or had you moved at this point? No, because you know that you wouldn't. Oh,
It's complicated. So I moved during the pandemic.
okay.
So when everything had first started, I was nannying. I was nannying for my best friend who I just mentioned for her two little cousins. And I don't know how I would have gotten through that time without them. Like that, just being around like little kids is so joyous and like so much innocence in them. I think when I started, they were like 6 months old and two. And so just like the sweetest girls. And that gave me people to be around during that time. They were my bubble who I got to stick with, and also a reason to get up and a reason that I had to keep on going. Like having that was so incredibly helpful. But the same thing would happen. I would get off with them. I would go home and I couldn't get myself to walk into that house. Like I was never able to push through that. And so it was in November or October of 2020, I want to say, when I came down, looked at apartments and was like, I need to do this. And so that was when I moved down.
So tell us, what else did you do to get through this period? Did you seek therapy? Did you talk to us about that? If you don't mind, I don't want to push you in areas you don't want to go.
No, I actually love talking about that because I was the most anti-therapy person that you ever could have imagined. And I didn't understand it. Like I didn't understand how something like that would be helpful. Like how would talking to someone who didn't know my parents help me with losing my parents? Like that didn't make any sense. And I ended up starting to feel like kind of insecure about the relationships that I had when someone would recommend therapy for me. And I was thinking, like, does that mean that you like, are you trying to not deal with me, that you're passing me off to someone else? Like I didn't get it. It didn't work out for me. And I kept on trying it, went through 6 therapists over 3 years. And
Wow. So you really gave it a fair shot.
I did lots of trial and error. And then I found my therapist who I have now. And I've been with her for almost 2 years. We meet twice a week. So it's like very, very consistent over this whole entire time. And finding her has made arguably like the biggest difference for me in all of this. And now I'm somebody who I understand why people like recommended this. And I totally get all of it now. And she is incredible in so many different ways. But what I really appreciate is she has never, ever told me that any of the way that I was feeling or any of the ways that I responded to anything were wrong. She's never, ever also tried to like jump in and like fix anything or save anything at all. Like, she is just so good at helping me remain present and meeting me right there in the present. And the only way that like I've talked to her so much about it, and like I feel like she's believed in me, but her believing in me is what's taught me how to believe in myself.
That's really beautiful. And I'm so glad that I'm so glad you found a match, because I think that one thing that was a very common theme when I was interviewing people for my book that I wrote, I interviewed siblings all over the world. And oftentimes if people had never been to therapy and they go to one therapist and they have a bad experience, they do not go back. So I have to ask you, I mean, 6 therapists, that's a lot of therapists. And so I'm just curious, you were anti-therapist before you even started, before you started to see a therapist. So you would be one of those ones that I would expect to call it quits after the first one. What kept you looking for a therapist?
I think without even realizing it, that I did kind of have hope that one would work out. So I had seen 6 before her. I had only seen, I think, like 3 of them, though, for more than a few sessions. Like for the most part, it was like 1 or 2. Okay, it doesn't work out.
And why do you say it didn't work out? You just could feel it? Or how did you, like, what was going on for you to say, this isn't for me?
So the very first one who I saw, I'm sure that she was figuring out how she was going to be practicing therapy as well. And so we were halfway through like the introductory session, and she had to stop it and just said like this was out of her wheelhouse. And that I understand now, but was very hurtful to me at the time.
Like, wow, I'm so complicated. You can't help me. I'm only laughing because of just because of the world of mental health, but that's probably how it felt, right? But was she a new therapist? Was she?
She was. Yeah, she was.
So I have deep respect actually that she was like, whoa, this might be just a little too much for me at the beginning. Okay.
Yeah. And then it was just, trying to figure out, I guess, like what I responded to and like what I like valued and appreciated in all of it.
So how long did it take you to find it? Was this a 2-year, how long did it take before you found this therapist that you're working with? Was this a year-long process? Was
3
it
years.
3 years from the time that you started with one till the time that you found her?
Yeah, but it wasn't all consistent throughout.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got about 10 minutes and I have a couple of pointed questions for you. So now you've been in therapy, you go twice a week. And have you been going twice a week since you started with your therapist?
Yes.
That's wonderful. And so this obviously that has made a significant difference. What other things in your life? I know you've got a very supportive friendships and your therapist. What goes on with you in the quiet hours? When I like to say when I don't know, I call it for me, it's sort of the haunting hour, where it's quiet, you're in bed, the house is quiet, the memories come. What do you do for you to take care of yourself?
I still really struggle with that. And that's something that I really like want to start sharing more about, is how that first year, like I was quote unquote doing well. And it just seems like since after then, like in so many different ways, like it's kind of gotten harder as I've processed it more and allowed myself to actually fully experience the grief. And so it is those like moments, the quiet moments where it just hits and it floods me still. And it's often like, it'll be triggered by something that is so little, and those aren't the little things at all, like the smaller kinds of things. And I have been, working on myself a lot through therapy and everything to develop the best like coping skills and stuff that I can. And I think that it all sounds so cliche, but like journaling has helped me a lot. I started taking creative writing classes, and that has been a really good like creative outlet for me to kind of like get my thoughts out. And yeah, I would say writing has been whenever my thoughts just start becoming too much and they're racing, I can't even keep track of them, like write it out.
Well, I wrote my dissertation on the therapeutic benefits of writing through
Oh,
grief, loss,
wow.
and trauma before anybody in my life died.
Wow.
And I'm launching my grief and loss writing course actually next month because the research behind it is profound. And that honestly is how I was a fiction writer before my brother died. And I ended up writing this, the nonfiction piece. And it is what saved me, I think, in dealing with my brother's death and how we can make sense of the world. And
Yes.
that's exactly what happens. When you put something on paper, you're getting it out of your head and it's powerful. I think that we really underestimate how powerful it is. Why do you think people write shopping notes, right? They'll write down everything so that they don't have to hold it in their head. It is the same way with our emotions, why journaling is so powerful, because it is our way of being able to take those thoughts and put them somewhere. Otherwise, it's like, it really is cliche. It's like a hamster on a wheel. You spin over and over and over, and we start to get anxious, or it feeds the depression, or it's almost like you want to get away from yourself. And writing, it's something that you are actually doing that is giving you emotional release.
Yeah.
So I am so happy to hear that journaling and creative writing is something that you are actively engaged in to help you. Because this is something that is going to be with you for the rest of your life. There is never going to be a time where big events, small events, that you're not going to wish your parents were there, that you go to pick up the phone to call your mother, right? I mean, my mother now has been gone for 2 years. And I always want to tell her things. Time is such a weird concept in grief, isn't it? It's like you're not in a ball where you're in acute grief. But I ran grief and loss groups for a long time. And what no one ever explains to us, actually it can get worse before it gets better. Not in that same acute grief way, but as you said, where you really, as time marches on, you begin to understand that you're really not going to see them in the physical world again. And it's too much to understand when we lose someone, and it really does take time, I think, to integrate that loss into our life. And you'll always be doing that.
It was something that was difficult for me too, and still kind of is, but I'm figuring out. But like meeting new people and bringing people into my life who my parents didn't know and who don't know my parents, like that is so strange even to think about some of my friendships now who I've been friends with for a few years, but they like didn't know my parents. And like the passage of time, like my necklace is my dad's thumbprint. And so it's so, so, so special to me. Like whenever I feel anxious or upset, I always grab it. I feel like I'm holding his hand. And ever since I got it, which was right after he had passed away, I've only taken it off 2 times. And so just to think that like for over 5 years now, like this has been on me.
That's so beautiful. How did you get a thumbprint of him made into a necklace?
The funeral home offered it.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you didn't get one from your mom?
No.
That's just really beautiful. Is it in a heart?
Yeah. It's a heart with his thumbprint on it. And then on the back, it says, "Always in my heart, Daddy."
God, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I just have to ask too, are those silhouettes or something of your parents in those 2 pictures?
No, no. They're
Because
just canvases from Home Goods.
it's so weird because on the right, so looking at you on my left kind of looks like a male silhouette, and on the right looks like a woman with a hat. I was just wondering if it was your parents. Okay. All right. 2 questions left for you as we're wrapping up. This went by so fast. Finish the sentence for me. Hope is.
Good question. The first thing that comes to mind with that is real. Hope is real. And I think that it took me a very long time to realize that.
Okay. Thank you. And the second one is, what does self-love mean to you now? What does it look like? How do you practice it?
It's been a whole kind of relearning, I think, of that and of trying to find even like self-worth, and like I've had to go through the whole process of like actively deciding that like I am worth doing things for. And like I was saying, it was like graduating college. I felt like I was just going through that and I had to finish it because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And so I've had to be like, what does Danielle want me to do? Like, I have to do things like for myself because that has to be enough. And I try, I think, to be intentional with that, of like doing the things that make me feel good and like engaging in self care. And that's like fueling my body with healthy foods. I have had a very difficult relationship with food since my parents passed away, and just trying to be like intentional and eating the foods that make me feel the best and moving my body. I mean, like I was saying, I had the days in the house where it was debilitating and I couldn't do anything. I think I've gone as long as 8 days without even like opening a window and getting fresh air when I was in my deepest sorrow and grief. And so now my grandma, I always check in with her every single day when I get outside, even if I just like go out onto my balcony for a couple minutes for fresh air. Like every single day I have to do something to get outside. And if I can't go on a walk, if I like am not feeling up for it, that I don't have that kind of energy to do, then that's okay. But I always prioritize somehow getting out.
I love that. In the grief and loss world, one of the things that we always talk about, and I'm sure that you've heard ad nauseum, is sleep, eat, exercise. The three things I think you actually don't want to do when you're grieving, right? Like you don't feel like doing any of those things. I remember I didn't get out of a baseball hat for like 4 months, and my husband's like, "Are you ever going to take that hat off?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't really know if I ever will." Because I didn't have the energy to even think about doing my hair. Like I didn't have the energy to think about doing one thing. And so I just appreciate even that you could say, some days it was 8 days, because that's just the truth. But I think when you finished the sentence that hope is real, that is that's very powerful. And what I'm taking from that is when you really believe that there is no hope, there always is. It just takes a while sometimes to believe that it's real.
Yeah. I would say I went through a solid 2 years where I couldn't find hope in anything. So now to be able to like sit here, and the fact that you said finish the sentence, hope is, and the very first thing that came to my mind is real. Like I never would have thought that before. So just that was my automatic thought is a big deal.
You're a big deal. I just want to say that your parents, they're so proud of you. They're with you all the time. And I think that you're one of the strongest people I think I've ever met. This story is really hitting me. And I want to thank you so much for coming and opening your heart and sharing a little piece of your mom and dad with us and your process. And is there anything that you want to say out there to listeners who might be really in the throes of their own deep grief? Anything at all. And if not, that's fine too.
I think to just do something, if that something is sitting up, if that something is brushing your teeth, if that's all the something that you can do when grief is its deepest, try and do something. Because for me, that was the biggest thing that started to make me feel alive again, I think, was something and getting the momentum. And if all that you can do is take that one step, eventually one step is going to turn into 2 steps, is going to turn into 3, and you're going to be moving again, like metaphorically and literally, like just as you start to slowly do things, you'll be able to do more things. And I know so much that feels completely impossible and absurd when you're in it. Like the idea that you'll ever be okay again, that doesn't seem like a possibility when you're so deep in your grief. But I think that you'll surprise yourself as you keep going. You'll surprise yourself when you see how much you can do and how far you can go. But it's just a little bits at a time.
Thank you. I want to thank all my listeners who tuned in today and listened to this incredible story of yours, Danielle. And I have no words except just thank you very much for being here with us. And I hope this was helpful to somebody out there who needed to hear what Danielle had to say. So Thanks, you guys. I love you. We'll see you guys all here next week. Bye for now.